you with analysis now on the handling of the coronavirus crisis so far. We are joined live now by former government advisor Terry Barnes and Ebony Bennett, the Deputy Director of the Australia Institute. Good to see both of you. Thank you for your time. Ebony, let's start with you. We've seen, of course, the really big focus on the way Centrelink is handling the increase in people seeking benefits. We've seen heart-wrenching scenes right around the country with queues of people lining up, not able to get the help they need immediately. Scott Morrison held a news conference earlier and he made the point that the government's trying to use the current systems to deal with this crisis. I mean, it's much easier said than done to try and expect our systems to deal with such an unprecedented demand on the system.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented demand on the system, but I think quite a foreseeable one, and I would have hoped that the government would have been slightly better prepared. A massive increase in unemployment is almost the first thing that was as a result of this crisis. So I think it was very welcome news this morning that Centrelink is going to make people be able to apply for that online through MyGov. Through MyGov, provided that works, I guess. But, you know, people need this money to be going out the door immediately. And at this stage, even though it's very welcome news that the Centrelink payment is going to double, the bulk of that money isn't going to be rolling out for another 4 or 5 weeks. And people really need that money now. And I think the massive queue that Centrelink just showed how desperate a lot of people are who've seen their jobs or their shifts almost go overnight.
Such bad news, Terry Barnes, for the economy on so many fronts, and the government obviously is spending billions and billions trying to tackle this, but are also acknowledging that more is going to have to come to deal with the unprecedented demand.
Well, that's right. Basically, our economy is going to be strained to the limit, but then economies all around the world are going to be strained as well. And look, I don't disagree with what Ebony just said, except for one point. I think the queues at Centrelink and the rush on Centrelink yesterday and again today has something to do with the way that both New South Wales and Victoria announced the escalating of restrictions and de facto lockdowns on Sunday. I mean, they didn't actually make very clear to anybody for some time what was essential, what isn't, what's closing, what isn't, and so on. So I think, again, we've got to get the communications right with this. It's not just shoveling that money out the door, but it's also making sure that people understand exactly where they are in relation to all of this. And I don't think we've quite got that right, though I think the tone is right, but I don't think the messaging is entirely there.
Ebony, we have seen obviously criticism of the communication strategies the government is using, and communication is hugely important in a country on board with what they are being expected to do. The Sunday-Monday mixed announcements, mixed messaging, I think was regrettable from the state and federal governments in terms of what we knew was about to be happening and then what ended up happening. But I think last night Scott Morrison's news conference did clear a lot of that up and took on a new tone that I think did probably give us a bit more confidence as to where we're at now going forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I do think there has been an enormous amount of confusion. I think an end to those very late night press conferences would be welcome. A lot of that comes well after, people have stopped tuning in for the day, but there's no doubt everyone needs to be on the same page. And the communications are going to be so critical to getting this right, this response. But also I think the government needs to stop thinking about this, particularly in relation to the economy, as trying to combat something with some temporary and targeted measures. We have never seen a disruption to the economy on this scale, and what we're going to need in the short term and longer term is going to be a massive expansion of the public sector to take up where whole sectors of the economy have been shut down, and rightly so, for public health reasons. So the messaging is one thing, but I actually think it's the government's approach almost that it's going to need to be much bigger, much quicker than I think we're seeing at the moment. Temporary and targeted isn't going to cut it. We're going to need some big structural long-term changes.
Yeah, and look, this is such a fluid situation and things are changing so quickly in terms of the upgraded measures that are being announced almost on a daily basis. Terry, we've started seeing text messages being sent to people around the country today. Wash your hands, use the best hygiene available to you. And that's a good start. There's a lot of criticism that it simply is just too slow, though, in terms of rolling out those messages.
Well, yes, I think that's right. But on the other hand, I think people are getting those messages, and certainly here we are talking to you on Skype, and I've stopped taking my little 1-year-old to the playground. So I think we are listening. But can I just pick up on Ebony again? I mean, it's not just the government as in the federal government here that's the problem. I think it's the state and territory governments as well. My sense is that the national cabinet approach, while it's admirable, is not working as well as it could, because one thing a normal cabinet has, a normal state or federal cabinet has, is what they call collective responsibility and cabinet solidarity, where everybody effectively agrees on something and goes out and sells it. Whereas here, they do have meetings, they do have discussions, but if a state like a Victorian thing or New South Wales or any other state, they seem to go and do it anyway and tell the national cabinet afterwards. But I really do think that one of the lessons we're going to learn from this is that sometimes our federal structure just does not work, and that we actually have to put it aside and focus on a national response and national leadership without any complications and clear sense of who's actually in charge. And sometimes I think it's a case of tearing up the Constitution and getting on with the job of the national interest, not just state-by-state interests, and not causing confusion to ordinary Australians in terms of what one government is doing and what another isn't.
Well, on that radical concept, Terry Barnes, we have to leave it there. Appreciate your insights and analysis, and Ebony Bennett, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you to you both. Yeah, I don't envy our political leaders at the moment. The pressure they're under, obviously, so intense as they're trying to figure out going forward. The schools issue, of course, is a hot debate right around the country.